Modern society operates on a comfortable premise. Time is perceived as external to the body, an abstract flow, equal for everyone. Sleeping late, a lifestyle choice; waking early, a preference; the clock, a social agreement. This premise sustains total flexibility, adaptable schedules, constant light, continuous production. The body is treated as a plastic system. It molds itself to any demand. This idea does not come from science. It comes from convenience. The circadian rhythm is not a cultural habit. It is a deep biological regulation system, present in virtually all complex organisms. It predates language. It predates technology. It predates modern social structure. It was not designed to obey agendas. It was shaped by rigid environmental cycles. Central error: treating time as something passing outside the body. Reality: time operates inside it. Every cell possesses internal mechanisms. They anticipate the day. They anticipate the night. Specific genes are activated or silenced according to the hour. Hormones follow predictable peaks. Body temperature oscillates within narrow margins. The nervous system alternates states of vigilance and repair. None of this happens by conscious choice. The social clock can be ignored without immediate consequence. The biological clock cannot. The culture of continuous productivity confused resistance with adaptation. Staying awake beyond the natural cycle became a sign of strength. Working out of phase became merit. Fatigue stopped being a warning. It became a psychological obstacle. Strategic semantic displacement. It transforms wear into virtue. The body does not negotiate symbols. It responds to signals. Artificial light during the night is not perceived as comfort. It is interpreted as day out of place. Eating at irregular hours is not freedom. It is registered as a break in metabolic predictability. Fragmented sleep is not partial rest. It is a physiological consolidation failure. None of this generates immediate collapse. This is the most common reading error. The circadian rhythm does not punish acutely. It disorganizes progressively. Systems keep functioning, out of phase with each other. Hormones arrive too early or too late. Repair processes compete with expenditure processes. The body enters a state of constant compensation. It functions. Reduced efficiency. Elevated cost. Imperfect functioning creates a dangerous illusion. Everything is under control. While there is performance, adaptation is believed. When performance drops, damage has already accumulated. The narrative of neutral time protects this illusion. It allows postponing the perception of consequence. It allows living as a temporary exception, even when the exception has already become the rule. The circadian rhythm does not demand moral discipline. It demands structural alignment. Ignoring it is not rebellion. It is operating against an architecture that was not designed to yield. This is the chapter foundation. From here forward, time stops being scenery. It becomes an active force. Active forces do not ask permission. The circadian rhythm is not a theoretical concept. It is a measurable system, described, isolated, tested in laboratory over decades. 1970s. Researchers observed that organisms maintained regular physiological cycles even in environments without sunlight. The hypothesis that the biological clock would be merely a passive reaction to the environment was eliminated. It is endogenous. Takahashi et al., Northwestern University, Cell, 1997, identified the clock gene, main regulator of the circadian rhythm in mammals. The discovery showed biological time is genetically coded, not learned, not cultural, executed. A few years later, Harvard Medical School demonstrated exposure to artificial light during the night suppresses melatonin release. Scheisler et al., New England Journal of Medicine, 1999. The critical data was not the punctual suppression. It was the systemic effect. Multiple hormonal axes affected simultaneously. The body's central clock, suprachiasmatic nucleus, located in the hypothalamus, receives direct information from the retina. It does not ask intentions, it does not consult the social context. It just reads light. The nucleus coordinates peripheral clocks spread through tissues and organs: liver, muscle, pancreas. Immune system. Each possesses its own cycle. All depend on central synchronization. When synchronization fails, shutdown does not occur. Internal desynchronization occurs. Miller, Levitt et al., University of Pennsylvania, Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, 2013. Chronic sleep deprivation and schedule irregularity altered the expression of hundreds of genes related to inflammation, metabolism, and stress response. The body kept operating under a different genetic profile. Critical point: the body does not enter wrong mode. It enters an alternative survival mode. Karatsorayos et al., University of California, Irvine, Nature Reviews Neuroscience, 2017. Circadian dysregulation compromises memory consolidation. It accelerates markers associated with neural aging. The effect did not depend on cognitive effort. It did not depend on educational level. It depended on temporal alignment. The biological clock does not measure productivity. It measures coherence. When external signals contradict internal signals, the organism prioritizes the short term. Energy is redirected. Deep repairs are postponed. Basal inflammation rises. The physiological error margin decreases, a silent process. It does not generate immediate pain. It generates precision loss. Long term, the loss appears where the body is most sensitive: emotional regulation, mental clarity, metabolic stability, tissue appearance, not as a sudden event, as a trend. Common error, attributing these changes to chronological age. Evidence points to another direction. The circadian rhythm does not determine how many years are lived. It determines how those years were biologically processed. From here forward, time stops being abstract. It becomes a molecular command system. Command systems do not fail by chance. They only execute what they receive. Circadian rhythm dysregulation does not produce immediate failure. It produces progressive functional displacement. Reason why the phenomenon is underestimated. Biological systems keep operating even when poorly synchronized. The organism prioritizes continuity, not optimization. While basic survival is maintained, the structural error remains invisible. Science describes this state as internal desynchrony. Peripheral clocks enter conflict with the central clock. Vollmers et al. Max Planck Institute for Biophysical Chemistry, Cell, 2010. Liver and pancreas can operate in opposite phases when feeding signals and light signals are misaligned. The result was not immediate metabolic collapse, gradual loss of efficiency in glycemic control. The pattern repeats in other systems. Spiegel et al. University of Chicago, The Lancet, 1999. Individuals subjected to irregular sleep cycles presented insulin resistance comparable to that observed in pre-diabetic states after a few days. The determining factor was not caloric intake. It was incorrect biological time. The same principle applies to the immune system. Curtis et al., Yale University, Nature Reviews Immunology, 2015. The inflammatory response varies according to the time of day, regardless of stimulus. When the immune system is activated out of phase, the response tends to be less precise, more inflammatory. Chronic low-grade inflammation is not a perceptible symptom. It is a degraded internal environment. This environment affects slow renewal tissues with more intensity: brain, skin, cardiovascular system. In these systems, small accumulated errors are not quickly corrected. They integrate into the tissue. Carroll et al. University of California, San Diego, Journal of Occupational and Environmental Medicine, 2014. Circadian dysregulation associated with accelerated telomere shortening in populations subjected to shift work. The effect persisted even after controlling for age, smoking, and body mass index. The central data is not the work itself. It is the repeated break in temporal predictability. The brain responds to this state with defensive adaptation. It increases vigilance. It reduces the depth of rest. It prioritizes quick response over deep repair. The profile may seem functional in the short term. Long term, it charges a cognitive cost. Lim et al., Harvard Medical School, Neurology, 2013. Circadian fragmentation was associated with volume reduction in hippocampal regions linked to memory and emotional regulation. The effect was not perceived as an acute deficit. It manifested as a gradual loss of mental precision. Degradation does not generate an immediate warning. It generates error normalization. The individual adjusts to a new baseline. Less clarity becomes interpreted as common tiredness. Emotional instability becomes a personality trait. Metabolic alterations are attributed to inevitable aging. Biology does not share these interpretations. It just registers the accumulated load. The circadian rhythm functions as an ordering system. When order is broken, explicit punishment does not occur. Systemic efficiency dilution occurs. Dilution does not choose victims by merit or intention. It follows exposure. It follows repetition. The degeneration associated with temporal misalignment is not a sudden failure. It is a predictable statistical result. At this point, the conclusion imposes itself without dramatization. Time does not wear by passing. It wears by operating out of phase. The next part will not address lifestyle. It will address biological debt. Debts do not disappear with effort. They only accumulate interest. When biological systems operate out of phase, the organism does not collapse. It compensates. Compensation capacity is frequently confused with resilience. In practice, a short-term mechanism, designed to preserve immediate function at the cost of structural wear. The circadian rhythm does not prevent compensation. It just registers the cost. Compensation occurs at multiple levels: hormonal, metabolic, neural, Drummond et al. Stanford University, Sleep, 2006. Sleep-deprived individuals maintained acceptable performance in simple tasks. They presented progressive deterioration in complex executive functions. The brain redistributed resources. The error did not disappear. It was displaced. Displacement has a price. The endocrine system is one of the first to assume the load. Cortisol, the central hormone in the stress response, begins presenting peaks outside the expected physiological schedule. Instead of aiding morning activation, it remains elevated throughout the day. McEwen et al., National Institute of Health, Annals of the New York Academy of Sciences, 2011. Persistently elevated cortisol levels associated with circadian misalignment, correlated with volume loss in prefrontal brain regions. The effect was not perceived as immediate damage. It was a gradual reduction of cognitive flexibility. Metabolic compensation follows similar logic. When efficiency drops, the organism increases basal effort, more circulating glucose, greater sympathetic activation, lower error tolerance. Barron et al., Columbia University, Diabetes Care, 2015. Circadian irregularity was associated with greater glycemic variability, even in individuals without a metabolic diagnosis. The body maintained functional levels, with growing instability. Instability is a debt signal. At the cellular level, compensation occurs by prioritizing survival over maintenance. DNA repair processes, autophagy, and protein renewal are postponed when biological time is misaligned. Chase et al., University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center, Cell Metabolism, 2018, circadian dysregulation reduced autophagy efficiency in animal models, accelerating the accumulation of damaged proteins. The relevant data was not total process interruption. It was incomplete execution, irregularity. The pattern creates a false stability sensation. The organism remains functional. External appearance is maintained for a period, a phase interpreted as successful adaptation. In reality, cost postponement. Biological debt forms when compensations become chronic. Each misaligned cycle adds a small residual load. Isolated, irrelevant. Repeated, determinant. Common error, seeking punctual correction, sleeping more on weekends, compensating with caffeine, increasing stimulus intensity. Strategies relieve symptoms, not the cause. Scientific literature is consistent on this point. Compensation does not settle the circadian debt. It only postpones its effects. Foster et al., University of Oxford, Lancet Neurology, 2020. Temporal irregularity, more than absolute sleep duration, was associated with worse cardiovascular and neurological outcomes. Regularity, not effort, emerged as the critical variable. Biological debt is not moral. It is not psychological. It is not perceptive. It is accounting. The circadian rhythm functions as a silent auditor. It does not correct. It accumulates. When effects become visible, the cause is already distant in time. It generates causal confusion. Degeneration is attributed to age, to chance, to genetics. Evidence points to another origin: repeated misalignment, chronic compensation, accumulated cost. The chapter ends here by structural necessity. The next advance will not discuss time or clocks anymore. It will discuss who pays first when the debt comes due. Biological systems do not charge debt uniformly. They charge where the error margin is smallest. The brain pays first. Neural tissue operates under strict energetic restrictions. It consumes a disproportionate proportion of resources. It depends on precise synchronization. Circadian misalignment affects memory consolidation. It affects synaptic plasticity. It affects emotional regulation. Not as a dramatic event, as continuous erosion. Skin pays next. Dermal cell renewal follows a rigid circadian cycle. Repair happens predominantly during deep sleep. When the cycle is broken, renewal loses efficiency. Tissue aging markers appear earlier. Elasticity decreases. Texture changes. Not by chronological age, by repeated temporal misalignment. The cardiovascular system accumulates a silent load. Blood pressure follows a predictable circadian rhythm. It should drop during sleep. It should rise gradually in the morning. When the rhythm is disturbed, nocturnal pressure remains elevated. Constant load on vessels, on the heart, without immediate alarm, with cumulative damage. The metabolic system responds with growing rigidity. Insulin sensitivity varies throughout the day. Better in the morning, worse at night. Eating out of phase overloads glycemic regulation. The body compensates. It increases insulin production. It reduces peripheral sensitivity. Result: functional pre-diabetes, without a formal diagnosis. With a defined trajectory, the immune system loses precision. The inflammatory response is calibrated by the circadian rhythm. When calibration fails, basal inflammation rises. It does not produce fever. It does not produce an acute symptom. It produces an environment conducive to chronic degeneration. These systems do not fail in sequence. They fail in parallel. Circadian misalignment does not choose an organ. It affects the entire temporal architecture. When the debt comes due, there is no negotiation, only biological execution. The body does not forgive. It does not forget. It only charges. The circadian rhythm is not a suggestion. It is a molecular command system. It operates independently of belief, independently of intention. Ignoring it does not change physics, it only accelerates the consequence. Biological time does not wait for understanding. It executes.